What's up, comic and pop culture fans? This is James with Mint Hunter Comics, and today we're talking about polybagged comics and what it means for getting them graded. So what's a polybag? It's a comic book that comes in maybe a collector's or a special edition bag over the comic. Maybe it has a card in it, maybe it's got a graphic on the actual polybag. Some that might come to your mind as well as mine would be X-Force number 1, Robin volume 3, all of the static and hardware, all the milestone comic issue number 1s, as well as Ultimate Fallout 4 cover A, first appearance of Miles Morales. I submitted a polybagged Ultimate Fallout 4 because I thought that it could get the 9.6 or the 9.8. I submit books from the 70s and get 9.8s on a somewhat regular basis. So how could I be so wrong about this Ultimate Fallout 4? But notice how I'm not unhappy, because I learned something really valuable, and not all hope is lost for this copy. Guys, go ahead and like and comment down below. We're going to be giving a 8,000 subscriber giveaway. I just haven't decided what it is yet, but it'll probably be something awesome. So this Ultimate Fallout 4, I bought it for $900. Now, you usually can get these for like $600 to like $850. So I paid a little bit of a premium, ironically, because it was still in its polybag. So I thought, oh, it's going to be perfect. I got a look at this thing, and it did look perfect, guys. It had the tightest corners. It was just the nicest spine. Now, I press 90% of the books that I send in to ensure it gets a very nice grade, so it meets its best potential when being graded by CGC. I actually thought it could get the 9.8 without a press. I took a massive gamble, and I actually submitted this in the most expensive tier, the walkthrough tier, so that I would get it back so fast, because frankly I was that confident that it would get a 9.6, 9.8. And I told myself if it got a 9.8, I'm keeping it. If it gets a 9.6, I'm selling it, and I'll make a little bit of money. So it got a 7.5. I didn't plan on that one. Now what's fascinating is when I look at the grader's notes, they told me this, and I'll put it up on the screen: a moderate polybag indentation down the center of the whole book. I'd never heard of that before. Now, I've submitted polybagged books in the past, and interestingly, they were part of a pre-screen and never got the 9.8. They always came back to me. So this is the first example I have of a polybag book being finally graded. And I learned a few things for sure. Turns out that polybags can actually leave a slight indentation. On a lot of polybags, there's a little kind of a spine in the back, and some of these books that are 10, 20, 30 years old, they're sitting, maybe stored perfectly in Mylar, but still in the back polybag. Over time, it creates a slight indentation, maybe in the back or in the front of your book. Well, I didn't know that, and it was so not noticeable that I submitted it to CGC, and they hit me for this polybag indentation on the back. So obviously my initial reaction was, wow, that's the most disappointing grade I've ever gotten. How could I be so wrong? So I went ahead and asked my friend Richard over from Bronze and Modern Gods. By the way, check out their channel, link will be in the description below. And I asked him a few questions surrounding these polybags. He's a bit of an expert when it comes to Ultimate Fallout 4 and gave some really solid advice on these polybag books and what you should do if you want to get them graded. Let's check it out. So guys, I wanted some answers on this whole 7.5 Ultimate Fallout 4 polybag situation, so I brought in my good friend Richard over from Bronze and Modern Gods to talk with me about this issue. What we got going on here, man?
Hey, how you doing today?
How's it going?
Well, I heard you submitted a Ultimate Fallout 4. The reason why you got a 7.5 is one of the flaws in the first print of Ultimate Fallout 4. I happen to have a raw one here. And these books actually came in a plastic polybag, which was great for protecting the book from the elements at the time. But unfortunately, the seam for the polybag went right down the middle of the back of the book. This book has not been pressed, and I was I'm hard pressed to show it on camera here, but I sent you a picture if you want to do an overlay for it. If you don't press out that crease in the back of the book, and CGC knows to look for it, you will get an 8.075 for the book, even if it's perfect in every other way.
And so what's interesting is, and I'll put up a picture on the screen, guys, but this 7.5, the only grader's note I had said moderate polybag bend in the center of the whole book. So it looks like, and you're saying that this is a common phenomenon with specifically cover A of Ultimate Fallout 4. And you were telling me that cover B or the ratio variant both tend to not have this issue?
Right. So I've got a graded A cover, which is this book, and it has been pressed, and it ended up with a 9.8. I also have a newsstand. The newsstands were not polybagged, and they don't suffer from that same kind of problem.
Wow.
There are two different second prints, which are also not polybagged. So the second prints are also immune to that. And then finally, the 1 in 25 variant, the Jezeric variant, no, it also was not polybagged, so it doesn't worry about that. So the only way you have to be concerned about is that cover A for the book. And if you find one in the wild that has been it's still in the polybag, no, you need to press it. If you find one that's bagged and boarded, make sure you take it out of the bag and board and look to see if it's been pressed or not, because people can press the books and not do an effective job at it, and sometimes even damage the book. So it's always good to look to see before you buy.
Agreed. And I think there's a misconception, and it's a lesson that I keep having to relearn. And it's that just because it's in a poly bag, yeah, like it's going to be good from like things like stains, probably things like that. But it can still get damaged corners, things like that. But if you're looking at it like when I got my poly bag of this, I looked at it, I checked out my corners, there was no color rub, nothing, no spine damage on the side. I was thinking in my head, this is a 9.6 or a 9.8. I didn't know about the whole, you should probably get it pressed, which is stupid because I usually get all my books pressed anyway. I submitted it and it got the 7.5. Would you think that this is applicable to all polybag books like X-Force 1 and First Appearance of Static? Like, should you just always, no matter what, if you're looking for a high grade, is it a myth that just because it's in the poly bag, it's going to be a good grade, or do you still need to get that thing pressed?
You still need to get it pressed. Poly bags actually have that problem with that crease. The seal for the poly bag tends to leave an indentation wherever it happens to be. So I would, first of all, for all modern books, I would press, just because the paper on the modern books is horrible. Marvel really has been skimping, as has DC, but DC has some of the thicker covers. But Marvel's really been skimping on the quality of the paper recently, and that means you get a lot of waviness in the cover of books.
Yeah.
The best way to get rid of that is with a press. So if you get a book, polybagged or not, I'd at least do a quick press on it to make sure that it's perfect before you submit it into CGC.
And actually, CGC, you use the term quick press. CGC got rid of the quick press. So I think what you mean by that as do a pressing job yourself or have a third party press it, right? Right. And you press moderns. There's a very special way to press moderns because they are very sensitive to temperature. If you press them in too much pressure, too much heat, you can damage the book, which is why, again, I say if you're going to buy one of these books that's bagged and boarded, take it out and look at it to make sure that it hasn't been damaged. And send it to a good presser.
Absolutely.
With a good resume under his or her belt.
Right. Sure. Absolutely. And for your book, the good news is you could crack that slab, press it, and end up still with a 9.6, 9.8. And, a 9.6 $1,000, a 9.8's $3,000. It's definitely worth the effort.
Isn't that crazy, viewers, that this 7.5 here, with grader's notes as the only problem, saying as this polybag bend, if I get a good presser, I can get a 9.6 or a 9.8 out of this book. That's That's a quite the grade bump, which brings me to one of my next questions. 7.5 and 8.0 seems harsh, right?
It does. It seems harsh. I think it's a standard that they've picked up on for the book. That's you consider if it's a 9.8,
right?
Except for that crease, to drop it that many grades seems to be significant. But I think they're making a statement saying that these Polybag books are not perfect, and they exhibit certain flaws that they're calling out. So that people who want to get their books graded know that it's not a perfect book.
Agreed. Seems like CGC's taking a stand and saying, these indentations from Polybags, they're a big deal to us. So.
Right. Absolutely.
And it's kind of almost CGC's way of saying, pressing wasn't that prevalent in the past, but pressing's pretty damn important these days.
It is. Again, with the modern books, you almost have to if you're looking for those higher grades. Older books too. It's a process that has become ingrained in the grading standards that CGC uses now. I mean, as the quality of books has been improving because so many books are being pressed, that means the scale to get to a 9.8 has been moving up slightly as well. So you really need to press before you submit nowadays.
You really do. And I feel like such an idiot because it's like I press 99% of the books I send out. I guess I was getting too cocky on this. I don't know why I risked it for one of my most valuable books. But now I know, man. Now I know. And one last question that I know I've wondered this for a long time, and I want to know your thoughts, is let's say you're submitting to a third-party grader or you're using CSS through CGC. Should you submit it still in the Polybag, or should you remove it from the Polybag first before you send it out to your presser, whether it be third-party or CSS? What would you do?
I would remove it from the Polybag. First of all, even if you took the book in the Polybag, submitted it directly to CGC without a press, they're going to remove it from the Polybag. They're not going to slab it in the Polybag. So if you've made the decision to get it slabbed, the Polybag is now superfluous. So remove it. If I would remove it before I send it out to a presser to just examine the book myself to make sure there isn't any. One of the things that you have a problem with Polybags is you get color rub. Just make sure that the book doesn't have any obvious color rub problems. You want to inspect it to make sure that there aren't any bent corners, which is something else that could potentially happen, because you're going to take that book, submit it to the presser. You don't want any surprises. If there's something like a color rub or a bent corner, you don't want to submit it to go through the pressing process and submission process and end up with a 7.0. So, you want to examine that book and make sure that it's up to snuff for the grade that you think it has potential for before you send it off to get pressed. And I would, by far, recommend a third-party presser over CCS, just because the turnaround time, is horrendous. And my cohort, John, who's on my podcast, he submitted a book, ended up in a press, ended up having a staple pull. So all kinds of horrible things. It's potential. So I'd rather send it off to a third party that I could control more the communication and the timeline, rather than to add it to the giant queue that CCS has right now.
Agreed. I know for one, I've got some books that are with CSS that I've had since January, and it is now June. So there's been no update,
Yeah, there's a whole conversation to have about CGC and their timelines. They're just overworked, and anything you can do to remove weight from your process is to your advantage. You're talking a month, 2 months for a press versus sending it off to someone who will press it. And also, there's an advantage to send off to a third party. A lot of these third parties have discounts. They can submit the book using their account and can get a 15% discount off of the normal CGC prices. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that answers all my questions about the polybags. Richard, I wanted to thank you for taking the time for me and for the viewers of the channel to ask some questions that I've always had at the tip of my tongue, but I've always been like afraid to ask, or I don't know where I should ask it or who to ask. So it's nice to get someone with a little bit of experience with these polybags to tell me, hey, James, that's why all those polybag books aren't getting a 9.8. So thank you, my friend.
I'm always happy to spread knowledge.
Amen.
Look for me on Bronze and Modern Gods on YouTube or Instagram, Bronze and Modern Gods. And we have a website called www.bronzeandmoderngods.
Link will be in the description, guys. Check them out. And there you have it. Apparently, this is an extremely common phenomenon with not only Ultimate Fallout 4, but other slabbed comics in the like. Now, it is interesting to hear that despite me getting a disappointing grade of a 7.5, a presser worth his stones should be therefore able to flip that into a 9.6, 9.8. In fact, I've basically had CGC do the work for me. They've already confirmed that the only problem with this book is that polybag indentation on the back. So essentially, CGC told me the only problem that the book has. Now I get to take it to a presser, get them to press it, and I should be able to get a 9.8. A 7.5 from a 9.8, that'll be one to remember, guys. So what does this mean? For me, it kind of means if you see 7.5s and 8.0s of Ultimate Fallout 4, you might want to see if you can get a hold of the grader's notes, because if it's this polybag thing, a simple $10 press might turn it into a 9.6, 9.8. Yeah. I've got a little box of books that were returned to me from CGC that were polybagged, including a couple X-Force #1s, and I want to get them pressed and graded now. So guys, don't make the mistake I made of just saying, hey, it's in a polybag and it looks perfect as the day it was off the press. Yeah, it may be, but you still have to take care of that indentation that can happen from it sitting in a polybag. In other words, not only should you press a polybagged book pretty much every single time, but you may want to press your polybagged books more than any of your regular books. Because CGC takes that fault so seriously, stands to reason that you'd want to get that pressed every time. Guys, I hope this video was helpful. I certainly learned a lot. I hope I could share this. I'm sure some of you already knew about this, but for the more casual collector, maybe you learned something new today. Anyway, let me know down in the comments what you think. Question for you guys: should I change my ending bit to keep on hunting from keep on collecting? I feel like that makes sense because my channel's the Mint Hunter comics. Let me know in the comments, what do you think I should do? My channel's almost a full year old and I've been saying keep on collecting the whole time, so do I want to change it up? Maybe. Let me know. And keep on something.